On February 21st, 2005, Nickelodeon premiered its new animated show, Avatar: The Last Airbender. The show revolved around the adventures of a 12-year-old boy named Aang as he and his friends travel the world, facing all sorts of danger along the way as they attempt to win a 100-year-long war. Flash forward 17 years later, Avatar has cemented itself as not only a classic, but one of the greatest cartoons of all time. After the series' initial end, many creative minds who both worked on the show and fans wanting to see its legacy expanded worked together to create not only a spin-off show, but also several comic books, novels, and even a live-action reboot in the works. With this under its belt, it seems like no other show would ever come close to The Last Airbender's legacy. That is, until the years 2019 and 2020, when Walt Disney Animation Studios would premiere two of its new animated shows, Amphibia.
Hello friends, welcome to The Nest. I'm your host, Little Nerdy Birdie, and in today's video, we will be talking about how I think both The Owl House and Amphibia have the potential to be the new greatest cartoons of all time for this generation. And like always, if you like what you see, please do not be afraid to like, share, and subscribe, make a comment, and tell me the next video you might want me to do. Shows in the way that they are presented are just a little bit better in some areas. Amphibia and The Owl House premiered respectively on June 17, 2019 and January 10, 2020. And while no one knew it at the time at first, these two shows would eventually create kind of a combined fandom. People found enjoyment in both of these shows at the same time and were committed to stay up to date with what was happening in each. Amphibia follows the adventures of a 13-year-old girl named Anne Boonchoy after she and her two best friends are transported to a magical world inhabited by giant talking frogs. Now, with the help of her new adopted frog family, Anne must do her best to survive this wondrous yet hazard-filled world while searching for her missing friends and finding a way back home safely. The Owl House explores the life of 14-year-old Luz Noceda, a hyperactive but sweet and kind girl who dances to her own tune a little bit too much for the people around her, leaving the poor girl feeling out of place in her own world, until she discovers the hidden world of the Boiling Isles. She decides to plunge headfirst into this world of demons and witches, and takes up an apprenticeship to Ida the Owl Lady to fulfill her lifelong dream of becoming a real witch. So, if I hadn't mentioned it before, both Amphibia and The Owl House use the isekai trope for their main plot/setting. Now, if you don't know what an isekai is, it's basically when a main character gets sucked into a new world, usually filled with magic, and they have to work around it while living there and also finding a way home. Now, while both Anne and Luz accidentally gets transported to a new world, Anne's stay is more or less temporarily permanent, while Luz's stay is more voluntary, at least in the first season. Now, while having these two shows air so close together was a very risky move, it actually worked out in both of their favors. Each show has a way of showing its setting and storytelling in a unique way that doesn't feel at all repetitious. Now, typically in isekais, the first episode consists of the main character's life in their normal world, and we get to see how they interact with that world. That way, when they are sucked into the magical world, we can see how they cope with the change. Now, what Amphibia does is very interesting because it starts us out in Amphibia, giving us the kind of like false feeling that, oh, we're gonna start out with this world and it probably is just gonna be about this. But no, we start out with Sprague. He's just having a normal day, walking around, and then he finds Anne, and then that's what the adventure starts. Now, they do a very good job in keeping how she got there kind of a secret until the end of the episode, in which her, Sasha, and Marcy find the music box, and they get sucked in. And The Owl House is a little bit more traditional in how it portrays isekai. We start out with Luz as a normal girl in school who gets in trouble a lot because she's just the weird kid. She expresses herself in ways that people don't normally do, which leads to her mom sending her to this summer camp to kind of like just get that all out of her system. And while she's waiting for the bus, she meets Albert, finds the house that has Edith's door,
It's transported there, and now she's in the Boiling Isles. And what's really special about the Owl House is at any point in time, Luz could have just left, and that normally doesn't happen in isekais. Usually, like, there's no choice. They have to do a bunch of things in order to go home. But the Owl House kind of flips that on its head, at least in the first season, in which this is completely voluntary for Luz, and she can go home whenever she wants. Now, when I first saw these shows, I originally thought they were going to be more episodic in nature, and while yes, there would be some ongoing continuity, it really wouldn't get that deep, at least until the end, but I was happily proven wrong. I was really surprised because even though Amphibia was split into two 11-minute episodes, they weren't really, it didn't really hinder how I would watch it. It made it actually more interesting. And as for the Owl House, I thought it was going to be the same thing because I watched Amphibia first. So I thought, okay, yeah, this show's probably going to be split into 2 episodes each, but it wasn't. Full 22, 24-minute episodes, which I really thought was weird because the cartoons like this when I was growing up, when I was way younger, that's just what they did. It was easier to just pump out episodes if you just split them in 2, and that was kind of like the formula at the time. Ironically enough, the Owl House's need to kind of break this formula is the given reason Disney said it wasn't going to give it a full 3rd season, but come on, we all know why. They didn't want to give it another season, a full one. It's because it was gay. And this statement kind of helps me transition into the next part where I gush over these 2 people who are adults who made cartoons for children. Let's talk about these creators, shall we? Now, Matt Braley was born on November 8th in 1988 in Sacramento, California, and while he grew up watching some of the classic cartoons, it wasn't until he was in high school when there was a career day going on where he met an animator that worked at Pixar who drew actually a picture of Lumiere from Beauty and the Beast. It was at that point that Matt decided that that would be something he would pursue in his adult life, like when he got into college. And after he graduated high school, he went to Cal Arts, and Cal Arts is basically where you go if you want to actually pursue a career in animation. There are other places, but Cal Art is technically considered the best. This is very interesting to me and just makes a lot of stuff make a lot of sense. Alex Hirsch, you all know him, Gravity Falls creator, went to Cal Arts around the same time as Matt, and while they weren't really friends, Matt would go and see a lot of his student films that were really enjoyable. And after Matt graduated, he went to go on to work for DreamWorks, and he actually worked on the 2013 movie Turbo. And while he was doing this, he was also going to see more of these films, and after one time, Alex actually approached him telling him about this new show he was going to pitch for Disney, which of course would be Gravity Falls, and he actually asked Matt if he would just do some test work, some test storyboards, and Matt did. Alex saw them, loved them, he pitched the show to Disney, it got greenlit, and then he asked Matt if he would work not only as a storyboard artist, but a director and writer as well. And he did. And while working on Gravity Falls, he also worked on the DuckTales reboots, on Big City Greens, and then something called Billy Dilly's Super Duper Subterranean Summer. I have no idea what that is. I have never heard of it, but I want to take a look because that name just sounds absolutely insane. It wasn't until a few years after his career in Disney got started is when he pitched the idea for Amphibia, and there's not a lot that I could find about his original idea and what the pitch actually consisted of, but it was greenlit in February of 2018, but wouldn't officially premiere until next year in June.
Now, I think my favorite part about Amphibia in relations to Ant is what Matt based her personality off of. And if you didn't already know, he based it off of stories that his grandmother used to tell him about when she was growing up. I love it when creators throw a little bit of themselves into the things they work on because it makes it feel a little bit more genuine. Like there was a lot of love put into this because it kind of represents real life. Now, before I get into Dana's part, I just want to plug my other video I did on her in reference to her response to Florida's very controversial Don't Say Gay bill. This woman has been through kind of a lot, and she currently works for a company that has proven time and time and again it does not have people like her or anybody who watches the Owl House's best interest at heart. And you can quote me on that because that's what's happening. All the love to you, Dana. I hope one day you can find a place to expand your work on where it's not hindered in any way and you get to fully tell the story that you want to be told without any restrictions. Dana Terrence was born on December 8th, 1990 in Hamden, Connecticut, and like Matt, grew up watching some of the original cartoons like the Powerpuff Girls, The Simpsons, and South Park when it first started airing. Now, interestingly enough, Dana actually spent a lot of her younger years as a dancer before she decided she wanted to be an animator. But she was still drawing and all that, and her first flipbook animation is of a Pikachu using Thundershock on a Charmander, and I think that's absolutely adorable. I wish there is a way she can find it and put it online because I would absolutely love to see it. Now, unlike Alex and Matt, Dana actually went to a different school to learn about animation, and that would be the School of Visual Arts in New York, where as she was learning, she was also drawing 8 hours a day and had a Tumblr at the time. Now, this is Tumblr in 2013, and if you are on that site at that time, you know it is vastly different than how it is now. How she was able to post stuff on there and then nobody saved it or nobody tried to archive her blog is just amazing to me. I hope she makes another one so I can see. I really want to see them. Now, I want to highlight two of these short films that she did while at school because I think they encapsulate perfectly what she would go on to do, and that would be her short film Kickball and Mirage. Now, Kickball, she did not all on her own. She mostly came up with the idea and did the animation and stuff, which won her a grant. But her other project, Mirage, she worked on with a person named Eichner McGall. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And not only did they both receive a scholarship award, but they were both just praised by the work that they did on this short. They said the animation was very fluid, very nice to look at, and that the film was executed just perfectly. And I think in those early days, Dana already had an idea on how she wanted to go into the film of animation. I think she knew what her style would be, and as luck would have it, her style would be loved by all and would be just worth all the praise and adoration that you could possibly give a person for showing them their passion project. Now, after graduating from the School of Visual Arts, Dana went to internship at this place called Jib Jab, where she would meet somebody who actually worked at Gravity Falls at the time. Now, this was 2013, so the show literally had just premiered. And I don't know who this person is. I don't think it was Alex Hirsch, but whoever it is was somebody who worked there at the time, and they had actually seen her short film Mirage and asked her if she wanted to work on the show as
a writer and a storyboard artist, and Dana said yes. They also saw some of her work that she did on Tumblr, and I really wish I could find the blog if anybody has it. Dana, if you ever see this video, I don't think you ever will. Please tell me some remnant of it exists. I would love to just see this work. Now, this is where Dana's career at Disney mostly starts. It starts with Gravity Falls, and then it goes into her directing a few episodes on the reboot of DuckTales, and also her creating and revamping the character Webby Vandercraft, who is my favorite character, and also I'm glad that somebody got a hand on this character and changed how she was in the original show, because Webby's personality in the cartoon in the 80s was basically girl, and Dana said that is not great. You need to make this an actual person. And she did. She also worked as a storyboard revisionist on the Tangled series. Now, I have never watched that, but it's always been on my list, and I do have Disney Plus, so I will make it a point to check it out. Now, even though she was working in the field that she always wanted to, Dana felt a little incomplete, and the reason being is because at that time she wanted to make her own show. Yes, she had fun working on other projects too, but what she really wanted to do was make her own original series. Now, the baseline for the Owl House, she didn't really start developing until 2017, and all she really had at that time was girl gets transported to another world. But eventually more ideas came to her, and the plot of the Owl House as we know it now came into fruition. He would base Luce's character off of a friend slash roommate of hers that she had at school named Luce Batista, and she would base Ida off of literally just a lot of female members of her family. And when I look at Ida, I just think that that is a lot of personalities to squeeze into one big-haired lady, and that's brilliant. We love it. Now, I know I just info dumped a lot about these two people, but I feel like it's important to highlight the success of the people who create the show you like, because it started from nothing and now it's something. And to me, it's always been interesting to find out more about the people who create the cartoons I love. I used to do it when I was younger, but it was really hard to find any information about them, as opposed to now where the internet is not perfect, but it's better for searching up people you like and learning more about them. I just think it's fun. I also think highlighting creators for things you like really help justify me saying that these two cartoons will be remembered and will have a legacy, like I said, Avatar does. And I'm sure back in the day, if Break was on the internet, they probably were, but if it was as advanced as it is now, they would probably have been more engaged with their fans, and thus kind of creating this platform for themselves where they could actively be with the fandom at more times than just going to a convention, because that's how it used to be. You really couldn't engage with people working on the show you liked unless you went to a convention. But now the internet is the way it is, and it's much easier to interact with them. That being said, I am against harassing creators when they don't do the thing you want them to do. Remember, you don't own what they made, they do. You are not entitled to how they express themselves through this show. I want people to remember. What helps drive the potential longevity of a show is its ability to have an abundance of well-written characters that people will love and latch onto. Luckily for these two shows, this effect applies to a good number of the main and side characters that get a lot of love. When making a main character, there are really two things you should focus on. Number one is making them actually likable by giving them a bunch of character traits that normal people have, just to a kind of silly degree because it's a cartoon. And the other thing is to give them flaws that don't necessarily
make them unlikable in the end, but add this sort of depth to them, that they're not just this one personality trait. They're this human that has hopes and wants and dreams, but also messes up like a lot. And I personally think that both Amphibia and the Owl House do a great job with their main protagonists, because they make them very relatable and likable, but are not afraid to show their flaws. Be honest here. Who all can relate better to somebody who has flaws than to somebody else who claims they're perfect? Of course, we want to see engaging characters with flaws because it makes us realize that we have our own, and that doesn't necessarily mean we are a bad person. And we can also fix some of the stuff that we probably don't like about ourselves. Now, in the second half of the first episode of Amphibia, we learn how Anne and her friends got transported to this other world. It's because Anne stole a music box from a thrift store. And this there are like two sides to this, I think. Like, one, Anne should know that stealing is wrong and you should never do it, but also she's a kid and probably doesn't realize that even though this is a joke or whatever, it could still potentially have consequences, which it did. It isekai'd her and her friends to a world of giant bugs and talking frogs. Now, I don't think this necessarily changed anybody's preconceived notion about what kind of person Anne was from the first half of the episode. I just think people went like, oh, wow, this girl stole. That's weird that she did that. So it's kind of her fault that she's here. Well, now I don't know what to think, but that's a good thing because it doesn't just paint this one picture of Anne. It gives us a sort of diagram of what her personality is. Because literally in a couple scenes after, when Sprig invites her to go outside and go to a local swimming hole in the promise of friendship, she absolutely jumps at this chance because even though she's in this weird world that's literally all of her fault, she still wants to have fun and make friends. And of course, in his true old person fashion, Hop Hop doesn't want Anne and Sprig to go outside because Anne literally just got here a day ago and the people of Wartwood aren't used to her yet. So it's very risky at this time for her to be outside. And of course, Anne ignores this and kind of pressures Sprig to not only break Hop Pop's rule of not going out, she also pressures him to help her steal the keys so they can get out of the house that she's locked in. And this kind of circles back to what happened in the human world. She was pressured to steal, and now she's pressuring other people to steal to help please her. And she goes about this by saying a real friend would do this for her because that's what they do, which is another interesting thing, is that Anne thinks that friendship is about give and take. You do something for somebody else and they do something for you, no matter how much they probably don't want to. So up until this point, we have kind of two glaring flaws that Anne has. One is that she can be easily manipulated and has just this willingness to please others in order to get their approval / friendship. And she also is kind of irresponsible and will do the opposite thing somebody says for her own benefit, regardless of what the dangers might be. And this very bad choice leads to her and Sprig almost getting eaten by this giant water snake monster that I hope doesn't exist in real life, because that sounds absolutely terrifying and I don't want to live on this planet if that's what exists. Lucky for her and for Sprig, she realizes the consequences to her actions, repents kind of, and then saves Sprig from getting eaten. And we love to see that, but this doesn't negate the behaviors she's learned from Earth, because up until, I want to say, the middle of season 2, she's still kind of irresponsible, she's still kind of selfish, and she still has this kind of warped idea about what friendship is, and that's great. I always hate it when a main character exists and their flaws are shown, and then the one time they kind of fight them, and the next time we see them, like in the next episode, they're an entirely different person. Like, that's not how that works. If you have these traits about you that are just not great, even one time acting against it, that doesn't mean you're not gonna do them again. It just means for one time you fought that instinct. You have to work at it and work at it. And what Amphibia does with Anne is that it still shows that she has her flaws, but through each episode, through each season, she progressively works at it to become this person that she wants to be. And it's really nice to see that. It's great character development. Lucy's character flaws are a little bit different than Anne's, at least in how they are portrayed. When we first see her, she's in school in the principal's office because of a project she did with snakes. Luce has a very active imagination, and there's nothing wrong with that, but sometimes you have to know the difference between what's real and what's fake. And in the first season of The Owl House, Luce has a hard time separating her fantasy books from real life. And even though she's transported to this world full of witches and magic that she is actively trying to be, she still has this vision of what she wants this world to be to her rather than what it is. And she wants to be the main character. She wants to have this kind of grand destiny handed to her because she believes she deserves it, simply because she's here and she thinks that there is a purpose for her finding the door and traveling to the Boiling Isles. Second episode, she literally finds this wizard who tells her she's the chosen one and gives her this fake map that leads her on this journey in which she is the main protagonist and gets everything she wants. But at the end of it, she realizes that it's all a trick and she wasn't actually chosen. And I can see why this can be a downer in some people's eyes, but to me, it's not, because you don't have to be chosen to do something great or special. You just have to believe that you're worth it. And Luce really struggles with this because literally everybody back home made her feel like everything she did was weird or stupid. So of course she wants to just give herself this grand adventure and make herself kind of like this person who is destined to find something great or save everybody that's just handed to her. But she kind of is not, and that's harsh to say, but it's the truth. She also has this kind of insatiable need to prove herself, and she usually does this by either taking something without really asking permission or diving headfirst into fighting something without realizing that, hey, this might be too much for me. And over time, as the series progresses, we see Luce change from this girl who wants just this preconceived destiny and jumps headfirst into everything without understanding, to a girl who realizes she doesn't need to be special to do the things she wants to do. And with her own special way of doing magic, she overcomes most of the things she's up against. And that's really neat to see. Writing these two characters must have been like an absolute uphill battle, because it's perfectly balanced. You got things about them that are not great, that other people might see in themselves and that they realize are not great, but you also have their potential to be different people, not change all the way, but kind of grow out of their immature ways or ways that can be negative and affect their life in such a way. I love it when creators take the time to create imperfect characters, because they're easier for people like me to latch onto, because I can see a lot of myself in them. It's better than having somebody who's perfect, who does everything well, or just having a blank space that you just kind of project your personality onto, because there's nothing special about them. They're just kind of a self-insert that people can just say, oh, this is me because blah blah blah. That was a dig at Twilight, by the way.
Now, originally, I was going to not only list my favorite side characters from both shows, but also give reasons why I like them. But then I realized that that's a lot, and I would be droning on at this point, and I want people to actually watch this whole thing. So I'm just gonna list my top four from both. In Amphibia, we have Marcy, Ivy, Mrs. Boone Choi, and Yunnan. And from the Owl House, we have Willow, Gus, Amity, and Rain Whispers. Full disclosure, I believe the second she turns 16, Sasha Waybright will discover that she is a lesbian, and I based that off of nothing but the last two episodes of Amphibia, and no, I won't elaborate. This is my headcanon. Get over it. Now, I think we can all agree that the evolution of queer representation in cartoons has been amazing, and we all know that it starts with Korosami holding hands, and up until this point now, it kinda is at this standstill point, with Lumini asking each other out and then referring to each other as girlfriends all the time. Although that being said, I still think that there's a lot more that people can do. For example, mostly what we get is women loving women relationships, and they just both happen to be cisgender. And when it comes to men loving men relationships that involve a main character, I literally can't think of a single cartoon where we have this in the main protagonist, and that's kind of a bad thing. We should have an abundance of both, and also a lot of other people in the LGBTQ community. And I'm sure all of that is coming along the way. We just have to be patient and hope that these people who want to show these relationships get a chance to. Nobody saw Lumini coming. Let's be honest. When these two characters interacted with each other for the first time, nobody in their head, nobody with like saneness at least, thought that they would end up together. It was like the Korosami of 2020, basically. Like, yeah, this would probably be a crack ship, but nothing would come from it. And then something did, and everybody collectively lost their mind, because at this point in time, what we always got was just the queerness at the end, where they would kiss, they would be in a relationship, but that would be it, say for either some comics or the creator actually going online and confirming the relationship. Because a lot of people, I remember this, when Korosami happened, literally the next day, I think it was Brian Konietzko who went on this Tumblr post and said, yes, this is real, they are together, and that was our plan for, I think, the last two seasons. And while Lumini is just this amazing stepping stone that we all needed, it should not be used to dunk on what we got before, because we would have never gotten into this point without the ships that came before. I want to read this tweet made by Noelle Stevenson, and if you don't know who that person is, they were the showrunner for Netflix's She-Ra reboot, and it really, like, the statement, like, captures what people are doing and why they should stop, because it's ridiculous. My hope for the future of LGBT representation is that we stop thinking of it as a race or a contest, and more of a community effort to uplift voices that have not yet had their stories told. Each individual piece of media is not an endpoint, it's a broadening of horizons. Keep talking, keep listening. I'm listening. It makes a difference. Pitting queer people against each other is an old tactic used by homophobes and transphobes so that we fight each other and don't save that energy for fighting them. Because at the end of the day, we're not the enemy to each other. They are. It's a lot to ask for everybody to get along. I know, but it is possible to. And I really hope that one day
people stop trying to say they're more repressed than anybody else, because it's not really a competition. We are all in a world that sometimes seeks our destruction, and the only way to survive is by doing what the people who have done before us do, banding together and fighting the powers that be, so that our existence isn't completely wiped away, because that is what is happening right now, at least like to this weird extent that nobody really thought about. I really hope that these two shows will be a stepping stone that some other creator needs to tell their own story with their characters that represent who they are. And I honestly want more non-binary and trans representation, because out of everything, you barely see non-binary people, and you see almost no trans people in anything. We are not going to sit here and pretend like the LGBT community wouldn't be where it is without trans people. They literally invented this community, and they deserve all the respect and recognition. As I'm recording and editing this video, both of these shows have not completed yet, but I hold the kind of expectation that when they do end, I will love them as much as when they started. And in like 10-15 years time, I will be going back and constantly rewatching these shows, and also like seeing how far we have come, because I am willing to predict that in the future things will just get better, and we will have literally everybody under the sun represented at that time. At least I hope we do. And without shows like this, that wouldn't be possible. So it fills my heart with absolute joy that not only does this exist, but I had the good enough sense to watch and enjoy it. And I don't think really anybody expected something so great from a show about talking frogs, or a show that basically kind of takes a dig at fan fiction. It's really great. Anyway, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this person who probably isn't doing such a great job talking about cartoons. Talk about cartoons. I really hope you had fun and are willing to come back. I am working on part 2 of the American Dragon Jake Long retrospective. It's just taking me more time because I am currently going through a couple of different situations in my life that just need my attention at this point. And I'm kind of justifying me procrastinating by saying, oh, I gotta do this and I gotta do this, when it really is just me putting off the inevitable. But I promise to be back really soon, so take care, folks. See you next time. Bye!